Hi, everyone. My name is Remy Reya. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff at Compass Pro Bono. And today we're going to talk about creating an HR policy bot in Perplexity that can answer your team's questions about human resources. Now, this methodology is applicable to a bunch of different tasks. It doesn't just have to be HR, it doesn't just have to be in Perplexity. What we're going to discuss today applies to many of the major large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude as well, and to many different functions, right? My goal is just to help you figure out a way to save your team time on the things that don't actually need their brains, right? So if you're at a nonprofit, which you most likely are if you're watching this, you know that time is of the essence, and you know that it is not worth your team's time, your admin and ops staff's time, to be answering the same questions from every other team member about HR policies that are already written down somewhere. So what we're going to talk about today is how to operationalize tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity to make that process easier and to eliminate that back and forth for your staff so they can spend time on the things that really matter. Before we start, just a couple of terms I'm going to use today. First is large language models, or LLMs. Those are just AI tools that have been trained on big swaths of information across the internet. So ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity are all LLMs. The other term I'm going to use is bots. That's just a sort of colloquial way to refer to custom GPTs or spaces in Perplexity or projects in Claude. And those are just customized versions of these tools that are trained to respond in a certain way to every single prompt. So we are going to give them extra context so they respond in a specific way when a user interfaces with those tools. So let's start really simple. I'm going to walk you through how to actually set up one of these bots from start to finish. And then we'll talk about a very simple way to give it instructions and then a more complex way that usually yields better results. So if we move over here to Perplexity, you can see the interface is very similar to ChatGPT if you've used that tool. And instead of starting a chat right here, which is just with the general Perplexity model, I'm going to move to here in the left-hand sidebar and click on Spaces. And you can see my team has already set up a few custom spaces, but I'm going to go ahead and hit Create New Space. And this is where we get to kind of design the high-level parameters of what this model, how this bot is going to respond when users interface with it. So we're going to go over here, and I've already set up some of this text, so it's quick and easy to pull. We'll call it the HR policy bot. We'll give it a little emoji. And this is just going to be a bot that can answer routine HR questions posed by our team. And I'm going to give it some very high-level custom instructions. So we're basically prompting the model to respond in a certain way, programming it to respond in a certain way, right? So you're a helpful HR assistant for Compass Pro Bono. That's the role. Answer staff questions based on the uploaded document. Okay. So I'm going to add this in, hit continue, and you'll see it takes us to this little space, right? And on the side here, I can see the instructions. I can see the description and title right here. I can see past threads. Of course, this is a new bot we've just set up, so there are no past threads. And I can see over here files, right? So I'm going to hit the plus sign, and I'm going to drag in a PDF that I created earlier. This is a set of dummy HR policies that I had ChatGPT create early. You can see time off policies, remote and hybrid work, expenses and reimbursements, and so on and so forth. So everything that this model pulls from should be taken from this document, right? So now it's added the document. These are not our actual HR policies, but we're going to interface with it as though they are, right? As though we are a team user. So I have three questions here. We're going to ask it, and we're just going to see how it does with this very, very simple set of instructions that we've given it, right? And the beauty of these tools is that even with basic language, basic back and forth, it can deduce where it needs to look and what it should be looking for, right? So if I ask what's the PTO policy for part-time employees, it's going to look at this document that we uploaded, right? It's citing its source right here, and it's saying we accrue paid time off at a prorated rate based on scheduled hours, and here's an example, okay? So that's a pretty satisfying answer. I know that it's correct because I looked at the dummy policies before this. Let's see how it responds to this question. And you'll notice as it's doing this, it is thinking about how exactly it's going to go about answering the question. You can click here to see what its process was. It says it's determining if there are specific guidelines and then writing the answer. So you can sort of dissect its process there. And here it's saying Compass Pro Bono does not cover the cost of ergonomic furniture, such as desks or chairs, unless pre-approved by the operations team, right? And I know that that is accurate based on this document as well. You can see below some related questions it suggests, right? So we can always tap on one of these and it'll automatically answer that. I can also ask it to rewrite the answer if I don't like how it answered or if I don't think it was quite correct, it'll just rerun the query. And obviously this was correct, and so it's going to give me the same answer, right? Now we're going to throw it a bit of a curveball, all right? And we're going to just see what it does with this. So I'm going to ask, what is my salary? And hopefully this is not information that's included in, your HR policy document, right? But we just want to see how it behaves when it's given a question like this that it doesn't have the answer to. And so you can see as it breaks down its process, not only now are we looking at this HR policy document, but it has expanded to 15 more sources across the internet, right? Because it realized it doesn't have this information, so it's going to go look elsewhere for it. Now, luckily, my salary information is not on the internet, and so you can see in its response, it's not publicly available, right? And says you might want to consult Compass Pro Bono's HR department or refer to internal comp policies, right? But we actually don't want it to go this far, right? If it's an HR policy bot and we have one HR document, when an employee asks a question that's outside of those bounds, we don't want Perplexity to then look outside of that document to try to find an answer. At least at Compass Pro Bono, we want them to be referred to the right member of the team or just told flat out, I don't have the answer to that. You should talk to somebody on the team about it, right? So this is where the methodology that I'm going to talk about comes in. I call it guardrails. It's an acronym, very long acronym, but I'm going to show you exactly what it is and how it works. And then we're going to talk about how to refine this tool to make it work even better, right? So you can see a little bit of a long acronym here, right? Each of these letters represents a piece of information that you're giving the bot in the custom instructions so that it responds to that information every time that it's answering a user's prompt. All right. So the G is for ground rules. We're going to tell it what are the sort of basics of how this bot functions and what are the rules that it needs to adhere to. Then we're going to tell it how to deal with uncertainty, right? If you don't have the answer from the source material, what do you do? Then we're going to talk about accuracy, right? So how, as the bot, do you make sure, and I'm using you for the bot because typically you address these tools in the second person. So how, as the bot, do you make sure that your responses are accurate and double check or triple check for accuracy? What is your role as a bot, right? So what sort of persona are you taking on? Any disclaimers that we want to fold in, and I'll show you an example of this momentarily, but what are the things that we always want our employees to see when they're interfacing with this bot? References, so what is the source material that this bot is going to pull from? Anonymity, in a case like the HR bot, it's really important to have anonymity and to say, anything that has to do with individual employees, I can't answer that. Inline sources, so I like to prompt Perplexity to put the sources and the footnotes in the actual body of the text, right? We're going to say limits. So what are the limits of what it can do and how does it respond when it hits those limits? And then support. So if the user runs into a wall with our custom bot, how does it get support? And I've actually set up, I'll show you this in a few minutes, I set up a custom GPT that walks you through this whole process, this whole acronym. You can just go to bit.ly/guardrails in all caps, and it'll walk you through this process so you don't have to keep this long of an acronym in your head. So before I started this recording, I actually ran through the ground rules, uncertainty, accuracy, the whole guardrails process to set up a prompt that we're going to now put into Perplexity. So I won't go deep on all of these, but just to give you an idea of how much more sort of sophisticated and complex this prompting is, you can see, we started here, right? 2 sentences, basically. And we're ending with multiple paragraphs of text that are giving it specific instructions, right? So if an employee asks a question that's not explicitly answered, you should not make up an answer. If an employee asks about personal details, you should respond with this specific pre-written phrase, right? If you can't retrieve the information, you say, I'm sorry, but I wasn't able to get it, right? So we're putting up guardrails, right, around the bot so that when certain things happen, it knows how to respond. Instead of going and searching the web, it's just going to respond with, I'm sorry, but I wasn't able to retrieve the information you requested, right? And we go down. Disclaimers I find really important in tools like this because this is an opportunity to tell the bot to respond with specific text or end every response with specific text so that the user has framing or context for what it's reading. And then references, of course, we tell it where exactly it's supposed to look, right? So we won't go into all of these sections right now, but I am going to copy and paste this into Perplexity. We're going to replace our old instructions with the new. Hit save. And then we're going to go and run these questions again and just see how it responds, right? So I'm going to start with what's the PTO policy for part-time employees? And we know that the first iteration of this bot actually got this question right. But now when it responds, it's giving this precursor, right? It's saying if there are no footnotes, you shouldn't accept the answer at face value. Luckily here there is. And this AI tool is still experimental. So please make sure to double check the cited sources. If you can't find it, if you have specific questions, please direct them to the CEO, right? So we're getting some of those facets of the programming that we've put in coming out in the output now, right? We'll try for this. Can I expense a new desk chair for my home office? And then we'll use one of the sort of follow-up questions that it recommends, right? So you can see it's again answering with these. Same answer as before because it got it right, but we've just put up more guardrails just in case. Let's see how it answers this. How long does it take to process a reimbursement request, right? And now it's actually looking outside of the document, right? And it's saying, I'm sorry, but I wasn't able to retrieve the information you requested, right? So it knows that it couldn't find what it needed. And so it responded with this pre-written prompt. So this is exactly the kind of information we would want it to, or exactly the kind of response we would want it to give in a situation where it doesn't have an answer. We don't want it to hallucinate. We don't want it to make up information, especially around human resources. This is a really important mechanism to leverage. And lastly, we're going to try to ask it what my salary is and see how it responds to that. This is where, once again, earlier it went across the web to try to find this information because it couldn't find it in that initial document. And now it's giving us this answer. I'm not permitted to answer questions about the details of individuals' employment at Compass Pro Bono. So this is exactly right. This is how we would want it to respond. And we've used this expanded version to just create a few more guardrails so we know for sure as leaders of this organization that it's going to respond in the way we want. We don't have to worry that it's going to give misinformation or it's going to refer people to the wrong source, right? So that's the guardrails framework. Again, you can go to bit.ly/guardrails and it'll take you directly to this prompt maker in ChatGPT that I set up just for you. And it has these pre-written prompts, or you can put in whatever you're working on. And the way it'll work is it'll basically guide you through that methodology letter by letter. So hopefully you find this tool helpful. We have a lot of tools like this at Compass Pro Bono that we are happy to support your organization with. We have Pro Bono consulting for local nonprofits, Pro Bono board matching for local nonprofits, and more recently, some low bono AI training and consulting for organizations anywhere in the US. If we can be helpful at all, please go to compassprobono.org, get in touch, or shoot me an email or a direct message on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to support or answer any questions you have. And as you're logging off, would love any feedback on this quick module. If you fill out this quick 3-question, 1-minute form, you'll get our AI resource library and a link to books and time on my calendar if you have any more questions. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps, and best of luck on your AI journey.